right. Here we go. See if I can pull up the chat here. Get started in 1 minute here. See if I can pull up the chat while I'm here. There we go. Chat, there we go. All right, cool. Ready to get started here in just about a minute or so. Let me know if you're not able to see my screen. I think I set it up correctly. Let's see here. All right, cool. So let's get started. So my name is Alex Merrigan, and I have 3 tips for scoring a 1600 on the SAT. So, of course, oops, there we go. Who am I? My name is Alex Merrigan. Like I said before, I scored a perfect score, 1600 on the SAT about 2 years ago. I'm also a math and SAT tutor on the Talent platform. You can see like a little screenshot of my profile there. Over 500 hours of tutoring. I've been a teacher since, for 4 years. I currently live in Berkeley, California, and I'm a current student actually at the University of California, Berkeley. I'm in engineering college, and I am doing electrical engineering and computer science. Yep, so if any Berkeley alums are in the chat, then go Bears. Any Stanford alums, can't say anything to you, I'm sorry. But yeah, that's me. And in terms of my special interests, I love electric cars, like Tesla. I love my Model 3. Any Model 3 or Tesla owners in the chat, please stand up. I love electric car research. I love renewable energy. I love math as well. Surprisingly enough, maybe that's why I'm a math tutor. And yeah, so that is me. So let's get into the first tip, the reading section. So the reading section is typically the pain point for almost all of my students, right? They're typically, they have more math skill than reading skill. And that's mainly to blame the education system, at least in my eyes. Like, I don't think kids read enough, despite, being told to read every day in like kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. I think there's a lasp in reading, I think in 7th or 8th grade, right? Kind of kids to stop reading because they've been told to read their entire life. And then as soon as they don't have to, they see it as kind of like a chore, right? So if you're a parent in this case, I would encourage your kids to pleasure read. Because previously, before we get into the tip, previously they've been told to read, right? But I think the real beauty of reading, getting that reading comprehension, has to come when they actually want to read. So if you're a parent and you have a child in 7th or 8th grade, or even later, right, high school, freshman year, just get them reading as soon as you can, because that, surprisingly, reading helps for the reading section on the SAT. So tip number 1. So, oops, why isn't it working? There we go. Okay, so I brought up a small excerpt from a reading passage here. So you don't have to read this, right? I'm not having you all read this random block of text, but what I want to emphasize about this text is that it's in kind of a different, uneasy language. It's in English, right? But we're not exactly used to the structure of English, right? So picking out some snippets here: settle the seat of power, teach obedience, and the work is done. So you can tell, actually, this is kind of in the context of like a speech, right? And this speech was, I think, about probably half a century old, right? So the way this is read is slightly confusing, especially to high schoolers, right? So they're reading something and they don't understand what it's saying. That's not a very good thing. So the way you get around this is putting this in your own words. So what I do in particular is I read the first 3 or 4 lines, right? I might go to sentence 3 here, maybe line 6 or so. And what I do is I summarize what I just read in my own words, in my head. I don't even have to write it down, right? So if I read the first 6 lines, I ask myself the question, what did I just read? Right, which is reasonable, right? And what that does is it actually builds a sense of structure around the passage. So if you do this for the rest of your history passage, this is typically like a history article in the SAT for the reading section. If you do this throughout, you will get a firm understanding, a deep understanding of exactly what the person was trying to talk about, right? So you get the main point, you get the tone, you get the main idea, and you get the main argument, right? If you do those things, because you're kind of putting yourself in the mind of the reader or of the speech maker, right? Of the person trying to make the speech, if you summarize it in your own words. And if you can get to the point where you can see yourself making the speech, then you have a clear understanding of what's going on. So put this in your own words. Again, this is most applicable in the history passage on the SAT. So on the reading section, there are 5 different kinds of passages. There's literature, there's social science, there's hard science, and there's the history passage here. And the history passages are typically brought up in this kind of English, right? Kind of more complicated English, stuff we're not used to as high school students, right? So putting this in your own words and dumbing it down as much as possible. So the way I would summarize this would be in, just a few words, right? So if a passage talked about the effects of cancer research on some kind of experiment, right? I would just, maybe summarize that, maybe summarize like a passage or two, or a paragraph or two rather, as we fix cancer. That is good, right? Just keeping it as simple as possible. Just keep the SAT as simple and as dumb as possible will help you dumb it down to a lower level, right? So this is going to be more applicable in the next strategy I talk about. Here we have, hold on. Okay, there we go. So here, I have a couple different questions here. I'm not going to go over all of them, of course, but what I want you to get, let's take a look at number 33 here. It can reasonably be inferred from the passage that Burke is particularly upset with the National Assembly's decision to do what? Okay, so when you read this for the first time as a student, it may seem initially kind of ridiculously confusing, right? So you don't understand exactly what the question's asking for. So another applicable strategy for summarizing on the SAT is for questions. So here, I would be able to summarize both the question and the answer choices. Okay, so I'll repeat that. So I want to summarize the question and the answer choices in my own words. The answer choice summarization is going to be a little bit different than the question, but it's going to be the same idea. So it can reasonably be inferred. Okay, so inference implies that it's not explicitly stated in the passage. So I have to figure it out. I have to use my brain, right? I have to understand what his perspective is and try to make an inference based on that. Okay, so that's number 1. Burke is particularly upset with the National Assembly's decision to do what? Okay, so what did the National Assembly do to make Burke upset, right? That's how I'd rephrase it. So exactly what I said. What would the National Assembly do to make Burke upset? And this is an inference question. So I know that this is not explicitly stated in the passage. Okay, so now that I understand the question, I would go to the answer choices, right? So in the answer choice number A, letter A, limit the king's power. So that would imply that Burke is upset by the National Guard's decision to limit the king's power, stop the king from doing what he wants, right? So I just summarized A in my own words, stop the king from doing what he wants, right? And what that does is it takes away the abstract nature of the SAT and makes it much more concrete, especially for the reading section, because I'm to the point where I can do the reading section like it's the math section, which sounds ridiculous, right? The reading is very abstract, but when you get it just to these simple terms, stop the king from doing what he wants, right? These simple terms, you can make it a lot more concrete, okay? So if you're taking notes, I would want you to take notes on that. As soon as you make the reading section more concrete, everything comes just like the math section, right? Everything becomes much more sort of rigorous, more studyable, that kind of thing. Okay. All right. So that's the only one I really wanted to go over. I'll give you more examples actually of how I would summarize the answer choices here. So looking at B for number 33, expand the size of the government. That would imply making the government bigger, hiring more government employees, right? So if you have any idea of this passage, if you've read this passage before, you would know it had nothing to do with expanding the size of government, right? Or in other words, hiring more government employees. It never mentioned that, right? So if you have that in your head and you're able to recognize that, you can immediately eliminate B in a heartbeat, right? Seek the approval of the public. Okay, so seeking approval means trying to, not really kiss up, but I mean, just like it says, this one's not really easily summarizable, but trying to become more famous or more likable with the public, right? Did the passage talk about likability? It didn't, so C is out, okay? So do you guys kind of see what I'm getting at here? So I'm trying to basically summarize it in my own words and then compare it about what the passage talked about. And if they're irrelevant, guess what? The answer is wrong, okay? That's that. All right. Let's see. So I talked a little bit about summarization, but the next thing I want to talk about is that every single word in the answer choice matters, right? So what a lot of students do is they read an answer choice and they skip over certain words that are very important actually in solving the question. So going back to number 33, looking at letter A, limit the king's power. So let's say I'm a student and I kind of gloss over the word limit, right? I lose a huge chunk of what that answer means. Limit the king's power, stopping the king from doing what he wants, right? If that instead said expand the king's power, it's almost the same answer choice, but with one word switched, but it means something completely different, right? So remember, every single word in the answer choice matters here. Expand the size of the government, not contract, expand. Especially the first few words in an answer choice does matter the most. But typically, a lot of students just don't read the entirety of the answer choice, which is ridiculous, right? Like you can read an answer choice and it can be completely wrong until the end, where it says not, right? Which of the following does not do this, right? So read every single word in the answer choice. That's another big one I can give you guys. All right. Let me take a drink of water here. All right, so my next tip is going to be on the math section here. And feel free to ask a question, by the way, in the chat. Actually, I don't have the Q&A up. Feel free to ask a question if you, if you have any questions, of course, on anything related to the SAT or in tutoring in general, I'd be happy to answer. All right. Take one more drink. All right, so tip number 3. This one goes with the math section. So, So I picked this problem out from one of the QAS exams on the College Board. QAS, if you're not familiar with, is the question answer service. So basically, out of all the exams administered in the past that have this eligible program, QAS, you can effectively swipe them and use them as your own practice tests. Okay, so this is the October 2019 QAS exam. So this was the real exam administered in the United States in October of 2019. Okay, so that's what QAS means if you're not familiar with that. And that's how tutors like me get like 25 exams because they have all these QAS exams in their back pocket. Anyway, looking at this question here, which of the following is an equation of the line in the XY plane that contains these 2 points? Okay, so if you're not familiar with the SAT, this question might take some time, right? Of course, if you're seasoned with the SAT and the types of questions on the math section, then you can solve this question very quickly. But let's say we're new to the SAT. Let's say we're an Algebra 1 or Algebra 2 student, sophomore, junior in high school, right? So this is not exactly the same way it's presented to you in your math class. It's a similar topic, right, in algebra, but it's not exactly the same presentation, right? It's asking you to come up with an equation given these 2 points. Okay, so how do we tackle this kind of question? Like, what is my tip actually for the math section? This is just an example, but for every question, I want you guys to read the problem fully, analyze the important information quickly, identify what kind of question it is, and utilize the correct strategy. So here, I read the problem fully. The important information here are those 2 points and the fact that it's supposed to go in a line, right? I have 2 points, needs to be in one line. Okay, so this is a, just come up with a point slope question, right? So that's the question type. So I use point slope, or rather I get the slope and then I plug it into point slope. So it looks like the slope here is 12/4, so the slope is 3 here. So then I plug it into point slope. So that's gonna be 1 minus, let's say 1 equals 3 times x minus 3. That's gonna be y equals, let's see. Okay, I'm trying to do it in my head, but I need paper for this one. But yeah, just start into point slope. So again, read the problem fully, analyze the important information quickly. So the important information in this case is the fact that we have 2 points and this is supposed to be a line. So this question is going to use the point slope form and slope intercept form. Just throw that in your point slope equation. So that's it. All right, so now let's get into a little bit more about how I actually studied for the SAT independently. So I didn't go through like a traditional program. I actually kind of came up with my own program independently because I didn't like, I actually didn't like the boot camps in the area. So how did I study? So I studied with the intense material of a boot camp. So what does that mean? So I used the best material I could find, the best, most expensive material I could find, and use all of it, right? I did every single practice problem I could find. I did every single reading section I could find, that kind of thing. So I used extremely intense material. I also had a very aggressive calendar setup, okay? So I had, decent work ethic in high school, right? So I was able to pick a calendar for myself ahead of time. Like, okay, I'm gonna study at 9 p.m. for 1 hour every night, right? I'm gonna take a practice exam at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, every Saturday, right? So I had that schedule for myself and I put it in my own calendar. Also, if you're a student and you're not using Google Calendar, or if you're anyone and you're not using Google Calendar, you need to. I mean, you can use a different calendar, right? Like Apple Calendar or whatever. Doesn't matter, just have a calendar and you're gonna be able to study a lot more than you think you can. Truthfully, like this was my junior year and I was taking like Calculus 3, AP Physics, right? Difficult classes that require a lot of time. But with the calendar, it makes it a lot easier to eliminate the dead time. Dead time meaning like on YouTube or Reddit or whatever, Twitter, social media. Eliminating that time helps a lot in freeing up study space. And I'm not going to get into it in this podcast or in this webinar, but I do have a podcast that talks about this as well. So it's designed for high school students, but in reality, anyone can listen to it. It's called Finessing the School System. And that's effectively what I did in high school. I finessed the school system. So yeah, it's available on Spotify or Apple Music. Just Google, or not Google, just look up Finessing the School System, and that'll lead you to my podcast. And talk about things like managing high school, managing classes, like I said before, study scheduling, that kind of thing. And the last part about how I studied is luck in finding the right system. Right, like I was relatively lucky in finding out the correct way to apply all the material I had and utilize the practice exams I had without wasting time. So that I think was lucky on my part. So with this luck and with the system I developed in high school, I want to be able to help every student study the way I did, right? Because I actually went from an 1190 to a 1600, right? And I thought I was not working that hard, right? I was working less hard than I think a couple of my friends and a couple of the other boot camps. So in reality, I scored higher than my friends in less time and in less effort. So I was thinking, okay, I got to be doing something right? So I'm like, okay, how can I help others? And the way I'm doing that is through my SAT program. So in my program, you get daily assignments, right? I think it's very important to do spaced rapid repetition for your assignments. So every day you need to be doing something different, whether it be reading, grammar, or math. So you get daily assignments pushed to you on Google Classroom You're supposed to complete them by the end of the day. Every weekend you have an exam. Of course, I think constant testing is essential to develop stamina and to apply the things you've learned and to see how you're doing. But the beauty of the program is the fact that this is a unique fusion of bootcamp material and a private tutor. So I know not everybody has the discipline to create a calendar like me and stick to it for an entire summer, an entire 4 months or so. So what I did was I considered this and I thought, okay, I'll just throw in a private tutor just so they have somebody to ask questions to, and so they can be held accountable as well. Okay, so that's that. And the beauty of this is it's just like my own SAT prep. So the goal is really just to replicate how I prepared for the SAT and make it available to other students. That's the goal. So just replicate me in a sense, with the same experience I had in my own test prep. Because I realized that my test prep was so much better than what everybody else was getting at different boot camps and different other companies, right? Like they're sitting in a room doing things that they already know or have no clue on how they're doing, but the teacher's going forward anyway, right? It's a terrible experience. So I want to make, I'm going to try to help students and make it a decent experience. So that's the beauty behind my program. If you want to learn more about me or my program, or you want to reach out, have any more questions, contact me. There's my cell, there's my email, and of course you can view my program website at that URL, talonlife.com/program/SAT-prep. Yep, that's my cell phone, so feel free to call or text me if you have any questions or would like to inquire about my program or anything else of that matter, or shoot me an email. And if you'd like to check out more details about the program, the landing page there will give you a lot more information. So please check that out before you inquire. Maybe that can answer a few of your questions. And yeah, if we have no further comments here, we will end it off. So thank you all for coming. I hope it was informative. Again, any questions, I'm always, I'm all ears. Yeah, of course, thank you for coming by. These will happen a couple times a month here. So I hope that this was helpful. Yeah, thank you very much for coming, everyone.